Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all having an awesome morning. I pray that some of you had a great first day back at school. And if you start this coming week, I hope you have a great last few days to yourself to get ready for the school year. I pray that God blesses all of you throughout this next school year. And it's going to be different, but we'll all manage through and just be safe and healthy. So let's go ahead and we have another worship set and a sermon today. And let's go ahead and get started. I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. And I was breathing but not alive. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You call my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Highest King would welcome me. I was lost, but He brought me in. Oh, His love for me. Oh, His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, it's free. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last He has ransomed me, His grace runs deep. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another week right here online for 4FIVE6. I am so excited, I think I've said that multiple times in the past 2 weeks, to go through the life of David. Like, it's just refreshing, to leave the New Testament, switch to the Old Testament. Things were written differently, or just a different experience. And I have never studied the life of David like this. So I am learning right along with you. So last week, we talked about Ruth. We went through an entire book of the Bible in a day. So good job, guys. Really cool story. I hope you guys went through and read the whole thing. I actually had a friend of mine. After I sat down and was talking to him about it, he went home and read it because he was like, wow, I forgot how great of a story it was. So see, it's cool, right? The Bible is interesting. But today David will be a living, breathing person, and not just a footnote at the bottom of a genealogy. So we are going to be in 1 Samuel, okay? So that comes right after Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel. So we'll be in 1 Samuel, and we actually jump all the way to chapter 16. So 1 Samuel, there's some things you guys are going to need to know before we actually jump right in. So feel free to take the time to find it. Because I kind of need to explain to you what the heck's going on in the world at the time when we meet David here in chapter 16. So we have God's people, the Israelites, and they are in Jerusalem, like normal, and they have had this tendency to walk away from God. God had given them judges to rule over. Remember, the book of Ruth started, and it was in the time of the judges. So we would have judges, and they would come in, people like Samson and Gideon and Deborah, which you may have heard stories about. If not, go back and read the book of Judges. They're in there. It's pretty cool. So the judges were ruling over the nation of Israel, and they would come in, and the people would obey for a while, and things would be copacetic, really happy, and then they would walk away from God. They'd mess up, and God would send them a new judge to help get them back on track. So after generations and generations, there's 10 or 11 judges that happen over the years for the nation of Israel. So after generations of this, walking away, coming back, walking away, coming back, walking away, coming back, the people are sick of it, right? the nation of Israel is tired of being ruled by judges. They're looking around at these other nations that are, the Philistines and the Amaleks. It's a random one in there. So they're looking around at all of these nations and people groups that are around them. And they see that they have kings ruling over them, right? And they decide, I want to be like them. So they go to the prophet, right? So the prophet's name is Samuel. That's who this book is named after. So they go to the prophet Samuel. Now, refresher. Prophet, God speaks to a prophet, right? And the prophet speaks to the people for God, okay? So that's how that works. So this prophet Samuel, which his story is really cool. It's at the very beginning of this book. Go read it if you want. It's pretty cool. The people of Israel go to Samuel and they say, we want to be like everyone else. We want a king. We're sick of these judges. It's not working. Let's do this whole king thing. So God tells Samuel, all right, they want a king. I'll give them a king. So the people choose this man named Saul. Now, this is not Saul to Paul in the New Testament. Different guy, unrelated, just happen to have the same name. So Saul was this tall, dark, and handsome man, right? He looked the part of a king. Okay, he was a warrior, he was big, he was strong, he conquered people and lands and looked the part, okay? But his heart had started to turn away from God. Okay, so he originally was all about God helping him and all these cool things. And it's a really cool story to see him kind of make this shift and to see how little by little he starts to walk away from God. And then when we open up, where our story picks up with David, Saul has turned his back on God, right? So we are in 1 Samuel chapter 16. We're going to start at verse 1. Okay? So this is what it says. All that in mind, this is where we pick up. Now, the Lord had said to Samuel, "You've mourned long enough for Saul. I've rejected him as king of Israel. So fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man named Jesse who lives there, for I've selected one of his sons to be my king." But Samuel asked, "How can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he'll kill me." "Take a cow with you," the Lord replied, "and say that you've come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I'll show you which of his sons to anoint for me." So Samuel did as the Lord instructed. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town came trembling to meet him. "What's wrong?" they asked. Do you come in peace?" Now, that's because if the prophet showed up in your town, it probably meant God was not happy with you. So that's why they're scared. Anyways, verse 5. "Yes," Samuel replied, "I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." Then Samuel performed the purification rite for Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. When they arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab. Maybe Eliab's how you pronounce it. I don't know. Anyways, took one look at the eldest son, right? And he thought, surely this is the Lord's anointed. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't judge by his appearance or height, for I've rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse told his son Aminadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. Samuel said, "This is not the one the Lord has chosen." Next, Jesse summoned Shemaiah, but Samuel said, "Neither is this the one the Lord has chosen." In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord hasn't chosen any of these." Then Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons that you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse replied, "but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and the goats." "Send for him at once," Samuel said. "We won't sit down and eat until he arrives." So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome with beautiful eyes. Not sure why that part's in here, but whatever. And the Lord said, "This is the one. Anoint him." So David stood there among his brothers. Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had brought and anointed David. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. Then Samuel returned to his town. So Samuel, right, has been really, really upset when we open in chapter 16, he's been really upset because Saul's walked away from God. Samuel and Saul had walked through a lot of life together, right? They were friends, and Saul has decided he doesn't need God anymore to do his job. But God is a God of action, right? Saul walking away hasn't fazed him. He's got another plan. He has someone else in mind to raise up to be the next king of Israel. See, because God is never at a loss to know what he's going to do in a situation. He knows perfectly what's best for his children. So God sends Samuel off to Bethlehem to meet with Jesse because one of his sons is going to be the next king. So Samuel gets there and he begins meeting the sons of Jesse, right? Get down to verse 6. And the first one, Eliab, I'm going to say that's how we say it. Eliab. He looks like a king, much like Saul did. He is physically this impressive person, and he thinks, Samuel has this thought, well, surely this is the guy that God wants to be king. But God shoots him down real quick, right? The next son steps up, right? Then we have Aminadab, and the same thing happens. And with every single one of the sons of Jesse, Samuel thinks that surely this is the right guy, that this is the guy that's going to be king. And with every single one, God tells Samuel no. See, because God points something very important out to Samuel in verse 7. He says, don't judge by appearance or height, for I have rejected him. And this is the important part. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Which, isn't that such an interesting point? Over and over and over again, God is telling Samuel, this isn't the one. I know you think he looks like it, and he probably could be a good king, but I'm looking for a great king. And this isn't the first time Samuel has considered the physical appearance of a person as this criteria for being a king. Remember, because we did it with Saul. But what God teaches Samuel and us is that outward appearances cannot in any way, shape, or form predict whether someone is going to faithfully obey God. Because your actions, they flow from your heart, not what you look like. See, because we are so limited as humans to just seeing the outward appearance of a person. But God isn't limited. He can look at what's in someone's heart. And what really counts in a person has more to do with the heart than with what you can see with your own eyes. And Samuel, throughout this whole process, he has to start to overcome this reliance that his humanity has on his own ability to see. Right? Talk about a total faith and trust in God and his decision making, because you look at someone and you don't think that God's going to be able to use them, right? Or you look at someone and you're like, oh, well, surely that's the guy, right? So Samuel had to get over that. Because Samuel wasn't, and we aren't God. So we can't know who will answer the call that God places on their lives and who's going to be effective in spreading his kingdom throughout the world. So we need to ask God to see people as he sees them, not as we do. And then, we get through all the sons, right? And then there's one left. And in verse 11, it says, I gotta find it. Samuel asks if these are all the sons. I should have just known that, Samuel asks if these are all of the sons that he has, right? And Jesse ho-hums back and forth, I imagine. And he's like, well, there is still one, but I'm really unsure if you want him. He's just out with the sheep and the goats, right? He is just a shepherd boy. It's a gross job. He's the youngest. It's the job we gave to him because I don't want another one of my sons to do it. Lowest of the low, right? It's a gross, belittling job that nobody else wants. It's he couldn't possibly be your future king. Like, really sorry, Samuel, you must have misheard. Surely it's one of these guys. See, nobody thought that it was necessary to include the youngest in this event that was partaking, right? To everyone else, David seemed super ill-fit to be the anointed king of Israel. He was too young, he's too inexperienced, he's too insignificant. Like, he's the youngest. He's the shepherd. It's a gross job. You smell bad, you're a sheep all day. It's disgusting. Those around David, they couldn't see beyond the way that he looked, right? So they didn't even bother to bring him to Samuel. But as we've talked about before, like when we were looking through the book of Luke, we learned God has this weird tendency to turn things upside down, right? So David is another example of that, right? He is anointed to be the next king of Israel. The Spirit of God fills him, and as we'll learn in the next couple of weeks, that Spirit prepares him to rule over God's people and lead them back to him. So here's what we learned from God. I promise we are almost over. I know this one was kind of long. We got some background information, that's why. Here's what we learned about God from this one story about David. God picks the right people for the right job at the right time, right? He looks at the heart of a person and utilizes their passion and drive. And he does that to bring people back to him, regardless of what they look like to you and I. So don't judge someone because they don't look the part, right? Because God can use all of us in any capacity he chooses, because he's God. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for another time that we can get together and be together in this fun way, right? In a different way. I pray that as we've been going back to school, that we can go out into the world and we can see people as you see them and not as the world sees them. That we can see the potential that they have to influence your kingdom for good. I pray that we'll have a great couple of first weeks at school and that we will be back here in this room, specifically at church here shortly, so that we can be in fellowship together and learn about you and walk towards you. I pray all of these things in your name. Amen. All right. You guys did a great job. I'm excited for next week already, which is kind of funny, but I love the life of David. Okay, I'm done, I promise. May the Lord bless you, keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, and give you guys peace. We'll see you next week.